This is a story about fate, hidden identity, and love tested by truth. When a humble gesture from a kind-hearted florist saves a mysterious man from a humiliating situation, she unknowingly ignites a journey that will rewrite both their lives. But when secrets unravel, so do hearts. Can love built on deception still stand? Rain lashed against the glass roof of Middleton Station as Evie Bennett, soaked to the bone and clutching a bouquet of crushed lilies, stumbled toward Platform 9. Her boots squelched with each step, but she was used to days like this, wet, messy, and disappointingly ordinary. She ran Bennett's Blooms, a cozy flower shop that rarely made enough to cover rent, but it was all she had after her mother passed. Romance was something that bloomed for others. But fate has a flair for the dramatic. Near the ticket counter, a man argued with the clerk. He looked ragged, like someone who hadn't slept in days. His coat was torn, hair matted with rain, and his hands trembled as he pulled out empty pockets. "No card, no cash, and no ID," the clerk barked. "No ticket." Evie hesitated. Normally, she'd keep walking. But something in the man's expression, a cocktail of fury and desperation, caught her off guard. Before she could rethink it, she stepped forward. "I'll cover his fare." Both men turned. The stranger blinked in disbelief, then eyed her like she'd just performed a miracle. "You don't even know me." "I don't need to," Evie said, handing over a crumpled 20. "Just, pay it forward someday." The clerk, unimpressed by sentimental gestures, processed the ticket. The man turned to her, water trailing down his unshaven face. "Thank you," he said quietly. "I'm Nathaniel." "Evie," she replied, already turning to leave. "Safe travels, Nathaniel." But it wasn't the end. 3 days later, Evie found Nathaniel again, dry, clean, and standing in front of Bennett's Blooms. Except now, he wore designer shoes, a watch that could pay her rent 3 times over, and eyes that sparked with amusement. "You again?" she asked, eyeing him skeptically. "I'm here to return the 20, he said. "And buy some flowers." Evie narrowed her eyes. "You look different." "Had a change in luck," he said with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. What he didn't say was that Nathaniel was really Nathaniel Vale, the estranged heir to Vale Hotels, a luxury chain across Europe. Days before their encounter, his wallet, phone, and car were stolen during a bender after fighting with his controlling father. Broke, hungover, and furious, he tried to vanish from his legacy. He never expected to be saved by a florist with dirt under her nails and kindness in her veins. He bought a dozen peonies. Then came back the next day. And the next. Evie, suspicious of his sudden interest, kept her walls up. But slowly, through accidental brushes and rainy afternoon chats, she began to trust him. Nathaniel, still hiding his identity, found something in her he'd never found in penthouse suites and corporate takeovers: peace. But secrets don't stay buried. Not when your face is on the cover of business magazines. And not when a betrayal is brewing in the very foundation of this fragile new bond. Evie always told herself that the flowers spoke before people did. And lately, the peonies were saying too much. Nathaniel, or Nate, as he told her to call him, had become a fixture in the flower shop. He helped sweep after hours, fetched coffee, and pretended he didn't burn his hands when learning how to handle roses. Evie liked to think of him as a strange but welcome chapter in her otherwise predictable life. But even chapters have shadows. One Thursday morning, while restocking Baby's Breath, Evie caught Nate outside arguing on the phone. His back was to her, but his voice was clipped, sharp. "I told you to keep my name off the damn shareholder report. If Dad finds out I'm not in Zurich, he'll send a damn helicopter." Silence. "No. I'm not coming back. I'm not ready. Not yet." She ducked behind the counter when he turned, heart hammering. "Shareholder report? Zurich?" Something didn't add up. Nate had told her he'd been couch surfing after losing his apartment. She'd believed him. Mostly. Later, when he stepped inside and greeted her with that charming half-smile, Evie didn't mention what she'd heard. But the warmth in her chest cooled a little. That night, Evie's best friend Lila, blunt, wine-fueled, and allergic to secrets, dropped by. Evie explained her situation between sips of cheap Merlot. He said he's, between things. But I saw him wire money on his phone. Like, a lot. Lila narrowed her eyes. Between things? That's rich guys speak for, I'm slumming it. You ever Google him? No, that felt like betrayal. Like she didn't trust him. But a sliver of doubt had already burrowed deep. That sliver grew claws. Underscore 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 underscore. The next morning, Evie gave in. She waited until he stepped out for coffee and pulled out her laptop. Nathaniel Vale, she typed, heart sinking as dozens of headlines and glossy photos loaded instantly. Vale Hotel's enigmatic heir disappears ahead of merger. From suits to silence, where is Nathaniel Vale? Runaway rich kid or corporate rebel? There he was, in sharp suits and beside limousines. The same smile, but in a different universe. Evie sat frozen, betrayal slamming into her like a rogue wave. All this time, she'd let herself fall for someone who had lied to her face. Repeatedly. When Nate returned, flowers in one hand and cinnamon buns in the other, she met him with a look that could wither a cactus. So. Zurich, she said, voice colder than the shop's walk-in fridge. He froze mid-step. She threw her phone down on the counter, his photo glowing from a browser tab. I looked you up. Nathaniel Vale, billionaire hotel heir, missing from the press circuit, but conveniently sweeping floors in my shop. Nate's face drained of color. Evie, I was going to tell you. I swear. I didn't want you to look at me like everyone else does. I wasn't looking at you like anything, she snapped. Until you gave me a reason to. He stepped forward, desperate. Evie, I didn't plan this. I didn't plan you. I needed to disappear from my old life. But then I met you. And for once, someone treated me like I was worth something that didn't have a dollar sign next to it. She flinched. And how long were you going to keep the act up? Until I stumbled into your penthouse. The air crackled between them, thick with broken trust. Nate exhaled shakily. I didn't mean to lie. I just didn't know how to tell the truth anymore. Evie stared at him, heart aching, but voice firm. Then maybe you need to figure that out, without me. She turned, walked into the back room, and shut the door. Nate stood alone among the lilies and daffodils. For the first time in his life, the man who had everything felt truly poor. The flower shop had never been quieter. Evie hadn't spoken to Nathaniel, in 5 days. She still opened Bennett's blooms at 7, swept the cracked tiles, fed the cat who pretended not to live there, and arranged peonies with shaking hands. But something in her had wilted. She missed him. But she missed the version of him that didn't exist. Across town, in a penthouse that overlooked the glittering sprawl of the city, Nathaniel Vale sat on the edge of his velvet sofa, eyes locked on a wall-mounted TV that droned on about market shifts and luxury real estate. He heard none of it. His mind kept replaying the moment Evie turned away from him. He had lied. Not to manipulate, but to protect something fragile. Himself. Her. Them. But in doing so, he'd shattered the one thing she valued most, honesty. He picked up his phone for the 20th time that morning. No new messages. Not even a "go to hell." He'd take hell over this silence. Evie avoided the news, the notifications, even Lila's increasingly aggressive voice notes. But the worst came that Saturday afternoon, when a glossy magazine was shoved under her door. She bent down and picked it up with trembling fingers. Vale heir resurfaces, hotel rebel spotted in Middleton. There was a photo of Nate walking past her shop, flowers in hand, half-smile on his face. The article spun it like a scandal. Sources say Vale has been keeping company with a local florist. Is love in bloom, or just another publicity stunt? Evie threw the magazine across the room. It was never going to be just her and him. Not when the world had already decided what kind of man he was. Later that night, she closed up early and walked to the boardwalk. The wind carried the scent of the sea and old memories. Her mother used to bring her here after closing the shop, promising that salt air could cure anything. Evie wasn't sure anymore. Then she saw him. Nathaniel stood under the boardwalk arch, hair tousled by the wind, wearing a hoodie instead of a blazer. He looked like a ghost of the man in the magazine, real, weathered, and impossibly vulnerable. I didn't know where else to go, he said quietly. Evie didn't move. You shouldn't be here. I know, he replied. But I had to see you. She crossed her arms. Why? So you can explain again how lying was just some noble form of self-protection. No, he said. So I can say I was a coward. And I'm sorry. You didn't deserve that. The waves crashed, and for a moment neither of them spoke. Nathaniel continued, voice unsteady. I thought I could run from who I was. Then I thought I could hide it from you. But the truth is, I don't like the world I came from. I like this world. Yours. Evie's throat tightened. I meant what I said, he went on. You were the first person to treat me like I mattered without checking the name on my wallet. I didn't want to lose that. But I lost it anyway. Evie exhaled, her anger slowly softening into ache. And what now, Nate? Are you going to go back to the boardroom? Sign billion-dollar deals and forget the girl who sold daisies at half price on Thursdays? He shook his head. I'm done with that life, he said. I walked out of a shareholder meeting this morning. Told them I'm not taking the reins. I left everything. Evie blinked. Everything? Everything that wasn't real. He stepped closer, eyes locked on hers. I want to build something that is. She stared at him, heart torn between the weight of betrayal and the pull of something that still beat fiercely beneath it all. Love, perhaps. Or something dangerous enough to pretend. Nathaniel Vale didn't just walk away from his father's empire. He detonated it on live television. During what was meant to be a harmless interview with a business network, he looked directly into the camera and said, I won't be the next Vale CEO. I'm not interested in building empires that crush people. I'd rather build something smaller, and real. Within 12 hours, headlines screamed betrayal. Stocks dipped. His father's attorneys called a meeting. His brother texted one word, idiot. But Nate felt something he hadn't felt in years, relief. Evie wasn't as easily swayed. She listened when he explained how he'd given up his board seat, sold his private penthouse, and moved into a creaky old motel by the docks. She even laughed, a little, when he showed up at Bennett's Blooms with a rolled-up blueprint. I found a place, he said. It's a mess. A fire-damaged building 2 blocks from the beach. But I thought, maybe we could fix it up. You know, together. Evie raised an eyebrow. A flower shop. A hotel, he said. And maybe a bakery, if you're still obsessed with cinnamon buns. She stared at the blueprint like it was a love letter written in another language. You're serious, she whispered. I'm broke serious, he grinned. I've got just enough left to buy that building and a toaster. Evie folded her arms. And you want me to just, what? Forgive you, fall into your arms, and start laying bricks? I want you to trust me, he said softly. Not as a Vale. As Nate. The building was a disaster. Mold, rust, and one raccoon that refused eviction. But they cleaned it. Together. Every day after closing her shop, Evie met Nate at the site. They painted walls, hauled wood, and argued over wallpaper patterns like an old married couple. He learned to hammer without injuring himself. She learned to believe again, inch by cautious inch. The town started whispering. That's the hotel heir, right? He gave it all up, for her. Must be love. Or insanity. But one afternoon, just as the place began to resemble something habitable, Nate's father arrived. In a black car. Wearing a blacker scowl. George Vale, corporate tycoon and shark in human skin, stood in the half-finished lobby and glared at the peeling walls. So this is where you've crawled off to, he said. Nathaniel stepped in front of him, spine straight. Leave. George glanced at Evie, eyes sharp as broken glass. You did all this for her. A flower girl with dirt under her nails. Evie's jaw clenched. Nate didn't move. I'd rather shovel mulch with her than wear your crown, he said. So turn around, and take your offer with you. George stepped forward. You walk away from this family, you walk away from your inheritance. You'll have nothing. Nathaniel smiled. I already have everything I need. That night, Evie said nothing as Nate locked the front door of their broken little hotel. He turned to her, unsure if she'd laugh or run. Instead, she kissed him. I believe you now, she whispered. And for the first time, Nathaniel Vale, the billionaire who once had it all, felt like he finally did. The first night in the hotel was nothing like a grand opening. The walls still smelled faintly of smoke, the pipes clanged like ghosts, and the only working light flickered like it was trying to start a séance. But to Evie and Nathaniel, it was magic. They slept on a mattress on the floor of room 3A, surrounded by paint cans, paperwork, and a single crooked lamp that hummed as they whispered dreams. I've never done anything like this, Evie murmured into the dark. Neither have I, Nate replied. And it's the first thing that feels like mine. They called it the Salt House, a coastal boutique hotel with 6 rooms, a rooftop terrace, and a tiny corner bakery attached to the lobby. The first guests were a retired couple who got lost looking for a wedding venue. The second? A food blogger who gave their cinnamon rolls a 5-star review and crashed the site with a viral post. The world noticed again. But this time, it was for something they built. One morning, Evie stood behind the bakery counter dusting sugar onto fresh croissants when a familiar voice spoke behind her. Still allergic to morning people, I see. Lila. In a green trench coat and oversized sunglasses, she sauntered in like a queen returning from exile. You ran off with the mystery man and didn't tell me? Evie wiped her hands. I was, figuring it out. Lila peered around. Is this figuring it out or living the fairy tale? Evie smiled, soft and unsure. Maybe both. Lila studied her. You're different, Eves. Happier. But also scared. Why? Evie hesitated, voice barely audible. Because every time something goes right, I wait for it to vanish. Lila squeezed her hand. Maybe this time, it won't. But the past has long arms. 2 weeks later, a news van parked across the street. Cameras rolled as a woman in red heels and a diamond smile stepped out. Natalie Vale. Nate's sister. Poised, polished, and prepared for war. She entered the Salt House like it was an insult to her last name. Evie tried to intercept her, but Natalie brushed past and found her brother tightening a pipe in the lobby. Well, if it isn't Middleton's favorite runaway prince, she said, arms folded. Natalie, Nate muttered, wiping grease off his hands. You lost. Oh, just a concerned sister. You know, trying to salvage what's left of your dignity before Dad changes his will permanently. I don't want his money, he said. Or his chains? Natalie raised an eyebrow. And what do you want, exactly? To play house with a florist while tabloids crown you the idiot of the empire? Nate looked toward the bakery, where Evie stood, equal parts fury and fear. I want this life, he said simply. Natalie's voice lowered. Then know this, Dad's coming back. Not with threats this time. With lawyers. With signatures. He wants this land. He'll shut you down. Nate's jaw tightened. Let him try. Underscore 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 underscore. That night, Evie stood on the rooftop terrace wrapped in a blanket, staring at the moonlit waves. Nate joined her silently. You okay? He asked. She didn't answer for a moment. If we lose this place, she finally said, I won't blame you. But I don't think I can start over again. Nate wrapped his arms around her. Then we don't lose it, he whispered. We fight. It started with a letter. Thick envelope. Embossed seal. The kind of paper that smelled like old money and legal threats. Evie found it in the bakery's mailbox, nestled between a flour delivery bill and a coupon for garden mulch. The letter was from Vale and Associates, the very firm Nathaniel's family had used for years. The contents were as cold as marble. You are hereby notified that the land on which the salt house operates is subject to a reclamation clause activated upon breach of succession responsibility by Nathaniel Vale, as outlined in his original inheritance agreement. In short, they were trying to take it all back. The hotel. The bakery. The dream. Nate read the letter 3 times, each word like a nail in the coffin of their fragile new life. This was buried in my original succession contract, he muttered, pacing across the unfinished lounge. They're claiming because I rejected the CEO position, the property is forfeit. Evie leaned on the counter, arms crossed tight. Can they actually do that? He stopped. If the clause holds up, yes. She stared at him. You left everything for this, for us. And now they're using that against you. He looked at her, eyes filled with something raw. I won't let them win. Underscore 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 underscore. Nate called every lawyer he knew, some allies, some enemies, all appalled. But only one offered real hope, Clara Morse, a tough-as-nails contract lawyer with a shaved head and a temper that scared judges into silence. She'd once left a billionaire in tears on the courtroom steps. You've got a case, she said after skimming the documents. It's murky, but fightable. They'll go dirty. Be ready. And they did. The Vale family sent press. Gossip. Inspectors. One afternoon, the local health department, coincidentally, showed up mid-lunch rush, citing obscure violations. Evie stood her ground, hands dusted in flour, staring the man down. This oven's cleaner than your conscience, she snapped. He left 10 minutes later with a free lemon tart and a pale expression. But the stress was bleeding into everything. The room sat half full. The bakery's regulars whispered. The headlines now read, Vale heir's love nest faces legal collapse. And worse. Evie and Nate had begun to fight. You should have told me about the clause, she snapped one night as they scrubbed pans in silence. I didn't remember the clause, he fired back. Do you think I would have dragged you into this knowing we could lose it? Her voice cracked. We left everything behind, Nate. We're betting on crumbs and sea air. And now lawyers are dangling a chain around our necks. I know, he whispered. And I'd burn it all down again for one more day with you. Silence stretched between them like a wound. Then came the turning point. Lila, ever the wild card, barged in one morning with a USB drive and the smuggest grin this side of the coast. Your lovely enemies forgot that contracts are only as strong as their silence, she said, sliding the drive onto the counter. What's this? Evie asked. Audio files. Recorded meetings. Turns out Daddy Vale bribed the original zoning board to acquire this property decades ago. Illegally. Nate blinked. And where did you get this? Lila smiled. Let's just say your sister drinks too much and gossips when she loses at poker. They brought the evidence to Clara. Her eyes lit up like fireworks. This isn't just leverage, she said. This is checkmate. On the eve of the court hearing, Evie and Nate sat on the hotel steps, watching the sun bleed into the ocean. She rested her head on his shoulder. Do you think we'll win? She asked softly. Nate took her hand, steady and sure. No. She looked up, startled. I know we will. Courtrooms are rarely places of justice. They're battlegrounds dressed in oak paneling and polite venom. Nathaniel Vale had walked into plenty in his life, but never like this. Evie sat beside him at the plaintiff's table, her curls pinned up, her dress modest, but her glare capable of cracking marble. To the left sat George Vale, polished and pitiless, flanked by attorneys who looked like they'd eaten nicer meals than Evie had cooked in her entire life. Behind them, the gallery buzzed with journalists, locals, and curious nobodies, everyone desperate to see a rich man bleed. Judge Hollister, a woman with reading glasses and resting judgmental face, entered with a gavel and no patience. Let's get this circus started. Clara Morse made the first move. She stood, calm and confident. Your Honor, we intend to prove that the contract my client signed as part of the Vale succession plan is not only outdated but riddled with conditional clauses based on corporate ethics, one of which was violated by the plaintiff years before my client stepped away. She plugged in the USB. And hit play. The courtroom filled with the oily voice of a city commissioner, recorded 20 years ago. Sure, George. The zoning board will approve whatever you want. Just send the campaign funds through your usual shell account. A gasp rippled through the room. George Vale's face didn't change, but the flicker in his eyes gave him away. The attorneys around him suddenly looked like they'd been doused in gasoline and handed a match. Clara smirked. That, Your Honor, is a zoning bribe. Which makes the original land transfer illegal. Which means, she turned dramatically toward the courtroom, my client owes nothing to the empire that tried to bury him. The judge leaned forward, expression unreadable. Mr. Vale, she asked coolly. George stood slowly. Your Honor, this is a desperate distraction by a spoiled. Sit down, she snapped. I've heard enough. The land belongs to Mr. Nathaniel Vale, unconditionally. The attempted reclamation was fraudulent. Case dismissed. The gavel came down with the weight of a lifetime. Outside the courthouse, the press swarmed. Nate took Evie's hand and pulled her through the chaos, straight into the old beat-up pickup they'd borrowed from the bakery supplier. No limo. No press conference. Just him and her and the burning need to breathe. They drove without speaking, the wind blowing through rolled-down windows, laughter creeping in at every red light. They didn't stop until they reached the clifftop. The place they'd first looked at the empty salt house and imagined it alive. There, overlooking the sea, Nate pulled out a ring. Simple. Silver. Engraved with the word begin. Evie stared at him, stunned. I don't want to propose in a hotel, he said, or a bakery, or a courtroom. I want to propose right here, where we risked it all. Her eyes filled with tears. So. Evie didn't speak. She tackled him to the ground, laughing through the kiss. That was answer enough. Below them, the waves roared like an ovation. There was no cathedral. No string quartet. No diamond-studded aisle curated by celebrity planners. But there was wind, sunlight, and the roaring applause of waves. And that was enough. Evie stood barefoot on the weathered wood deck overlooking the sea, her white dress fluttering like a banner of surrender to happiness. In her hands, a bouquet of wildflowers she'd picked herself, the same mix she used to sell to couples who had no idea what real love cost. Lila was behind her, crying louder than the ocean, mascara running like a melting crime scene. God, I knew it. I knew you two lunatics were endgame. Evie just smiled. Nate waited at the makeshift altar, wearing a linen shirt, rolled sleeves, and the stupid grin of a man who'd given up billions and still came out richer. The guests? A strange, beautiful mix, local bakers, fishermen, 3 former hotel magnates who now lived in camper vans, the retired couple from room 2B, and even Clara Morse, who arrived fashionably late and made the judge her +1. The officiant was a guy named Teddy who ran the surf rental shack. He held the ceremony script in one hand and a popsicle in the other. "You ready?" he asked Evie as she stepped forward. "More than I've ever been." The vows were not written on parchment. They were whispered, shaky, spoken like secrets finally allowed to bloom. "I was a lie before you," Nate said. "You gave me truth. Even when I didn't deserve it." "I was alone before you," Evie said. "You gave me chaos. And I've never loved anything more." They sealed it with a kiss that tasted like sea salt, lemon icing, and 100 near misses. And the crowd cheered like the ending of a movie that finally got it right. Later that night, the salt house glowed under string lights and the soft buzz of laughter. Guests spilled from the bakery to the rooftop, dancing to a playlist Lila insisted was chaotically romantic, somewhere between Edith Piaf and Lizzo. Nate spun Evie in his arms, barefoot and breathless, the hotel behind them no longer just a building, but a story. A life. "You really don't miss the suits," she teased. He dipped her low, eyes full of fire and devotion. "I traded Armani for aprons. You think I want to go back?" She grinned. "Not unless the aprons are monogrammed." They kissed again, and again, until someone shouted, "Get a room," and Nate responded, "I built 6." At midnight, the couple snuck away from the party, walking hand in hand down to the moonlit shore. "I still can't believe it," Evie whispered. "That you gave it all up." Nate looked at her, serious and steady. "I didn't give anything up," he said. "I just finally figured out what was worth keeping." She leaned into him, heart full. And there, under the stars, with bare feet in the surf and their futures stitched together in salt and vows, Nathaniel Vale and Evie Bennett began their real life. Not perfect. But true. The end.